Welcome to Porsche Patton with Bracken Helms, the show where we hear Bracken and his distinguished guests from the Porsche community patter on about Porsches and all things automotive. Porsche Patter is sponsored by Circuit 64. Circuit 64 creates authentic automotive apparel made for like-minded automotive enthusiasts. The links for Circuit 64 are in the show notes. Okay, let's get to it.
Okay, here's some more stories from Crazy Bill Patton. In this one, Bill talks about his connection to Garretson Enterprise, his trips to Le Mans, and some stories he has with Paul Newman and Bobby Rahal. All right, here's Crazy Bill Patton.
How did you get into Porsches?
I'll never forget that day as long as I live. I was with my dad, and I was, I think, 11 years old. And it was in the early 50s. I'm going to guess 53, because that would kind of equate with 11 and 12. And we were sitting at an intersection in Long Beach, California, and he pointed at a car across the street, and he said, "You see that car?" And I said, "You mean that ugly, flat, little roundish looking thing?" And he said, "Yeah." And it was, I don't know exactly what it was. It was probably a Speedster, but it was a convertible, and it was a 356. He said, "That's the finest car on earth." Well, I believed everything my dad said, in spite of the fact that that car just looked like a flat Volkswagen to me. And so I paid attention to that. And later on, when, I was in high school and all the other guys were lusting after Austin Healey's and other brands, I just had Porsche locked in my head. So I went out and bought a 356 a week after divorcing my first, I'll take that back. After she divorced me, I went out and bought a 356, and 52 cars later, I'm not finished.
Let's hear about the mosque story.
The what?
Mosque.
Mosque?
Yeah.
Oh, are you talking about the license plate thing?
Yeah.
Have I told you all these stories? Oh, my God.
I heard this one twice. Well, actually, I made you tell me a second. You're talking about
my license plate?
Yeah.
Okay, so in 75, I bought a brand new silver Carrera. This is the second year where it had any kind of a tail on it, and it was the first year of the whale tail, which made it a very distinguished-looking car, even more so than the year before when it had the whale, or when it had the ducktail. So I'm trying, and silver, of course, is a traditional Porsche color. So I'm driving around in this Porsche, and it said Carrera on the side. It was a gorgeous car, and it got tons of attention. I always liked personalized license plates. And my nickname in the club at the time was the Führer, like Hitler. It translates to leader. Führer means leader. And it's not sinister until you associate Hitler's name with it. So I parked the car in front of a mosque one night, and I came out, and it had been keyed beyond belief. And I sat in the car, and I thought to myself, okay, now there's stupidity. First of all, having a plate that's that aggressive, you should have known. I didn't. But the lesson was learned that it was an aggressive thing to put on a car. And then I parked it right in the wrong spot. So, and you know what? As mad as I was, I kind of couldn't blame those people, because if something reverse had been done, somebody had parked their car in front of my house and it said Patton's a turd, I probably would have keyed their car.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I offended 13 million Jewish people in a mosque, and they got me back for it. And I don't blame them.
I hate personalized plates.
I love them.
So you replaced it with something else, though. You went and changed it, right?
Yeah. I got that plate off of the car the next day. I actually went to Stephanie Anderson. She had a plate, Paying, paying. And I'd always wanted that plate, and I saw it on her car once. And I said, "Oh, my God, I want that plate." And I said, "If you ever turn it in, I want it." So she phones me one morning, and she says, "I'm going to DMV, and I'm turning in the plate. If you're there, it's yours." And I went and bought that plate. I still own it. I still own that plate.
It says what?
Paying. Like I'm paying for the car? Paying.
Yeah, you're paying for those keyed up car. You're paying for your dumb decision.
I sure was paying.
So you got any? Do you want to explain any of your controversial stories while at the Nugget? What is it? It's like the newsletter for the GGR or what? Golden Gate Region?
It was, the Nugget was the Golden Gate Region newsletter, and it was once a month, and mine was a gossip column, and it was called Patton Place. And all I did was make jokes and fun of and criticize and harass the members of Golden Gate Region. And it was really funny because I got away with it.
So go ahead and tell me you finally ended it because of one. Well, let's talk about the one. Maybe we don't have to say names.
There was one story. I was on a roll, but I was also getting tired. And the article kept expanding because the more I wrote, the more people came to me with stories, and the more I picked up and so it seemed like every month it was an inch longer. And one day I thought to myself, oh my God, it's going to be as long as this table someday. And maybe I should quit and move on, but I couldn't. I was really motivated by how much fun I had the next day after it was published, with people coming and saying, holy crap, was her butt that good? Because I would say stuff like that. And it was published in a sports car club magazine. Well, the thing that ruined it all was there was a couple, I'll leave their names out, and they were, for lack of a better word, immense people. They were quite large as human Homo sapiens go. And they drove a 911, and I would venture to guess that between them, they were in the neighborhood of 660 pounds. Now, I don't know whether it was 330 apiece or whether he was heavier, but the other funny thing about it was they were both short, 5'5" and 5'3" or something like that, which expanded their horizontal beings. The funny part of this story is he himself, the guy, the husband, said to me the words that I printed. And I didn't say, is this on the record, or can I publish this or not? I wrote it down immediately. I'm going to say this. He said it first, not me. I didn't make this up. And I almost wished I had made it up, because I had to quit over it without saying that he said it. I couldn't use that excuse. Okay, so what I said in the Nugget was, I'm going to call them the Smiths. The Smiths are the only couple I know who have a 911 with flared doors. Now, in retrospect, it's kind of innocent, and you really have to think about it for a minute. But everybody knew who the Smiths were, and everybody knew that they were portly, and everybody saw them getting in and out of that damn car, and that sometimes the doors wouldn't close. But they didn't know that he's the one that said to me, we have the only 911 with flared doors. Well, I published it, and they both came unglued publicly, really ripped me. And I was done. I went to write the next article, and I kept looking at the pen. I've told the story to a couple of people, and I say, well, why didn't you just say that he said it? And I said, well, that would be stupid, because now I'm defending myself for one thing. He can deny it for another. And what's the point? The real point is I can't write. It ruined it for me. I can't do it. I cannot pick up the pen and write that again. And that was the last one I ever wrote. I think I wrote one saying goodbye.
Okay. How did you get linked in with Garretson Enterprise?
Well, both Bob Garretson and Bruce Anderson were huge friends. And I don't know whether their friendship came first or Garretson came first, but they were both. I think the way that operation worked was that Garretson was the money and Bruce was the hands and the hands-on guy. Garretson didn't want anything to do with running a thing, and so he financed it and Bruce ran it. And between them, it was probably the best shop in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I don't know. We
should lay off of that subject. We don't want to go any further with that. Let me just tell you how I eventually was in a position where I had to be careful about who I had work on my cars, because if I was playing favorites, and I had so many friends and by this time some clients that were in those Porsche businesses. But I think Garretson was the first one who ever worked on any of my cars. Later on, there was Kaler and there was Ken's Technique, and there was, there were a bunch of them. As a matter of fact, I had 4 different mechanics at one point because I had 4 different cars, and each one of them was a specialty. And so the 911 went to Garretson, and the 356 went to this guy, and so on and so forth. But that's how I was friends with all of those guys, including the guys in the shop, Jerry and what, because they were all prominent, PCA Golden Gate members. So it was just an intermingling of what they did versus our friendship.
And so you were but how did it get to where they're inviting you?
Well, that Vermont thing was very interesting. I wasn't going to go. 79, I was the secretary of Golden Gate Region, and I was going to run for president. I knew that if we could change the bylaws. Le Mans is in June. All of these friends of mine are going to Le Mans, and I really want to go. And by this time, I had custody of my kids. So I was going to have to find a way to have somebody look after my kids for 2 or 3 weeks. It was just a big nightmare. So somebody called and said, if you go to Le Mans, there's a really special job waiting for you.
So they were already trying to get you to go, and then this was because you didn't really have a job because you didn't know what you were going to do yet.
Going to Le Mans would have meant I would have gone to Le Mans as a spectator and hung around the team.
So would they have paid your way?
Oh, no.
Oh, so, okay, keep going.
No. When Barber called me and said, you got to go. We want you to go. And so he did have that secret job for me, the Newman one.
Yeah.
He said, go to World Airlines, and I've got it all lined up for you.
So you didn't know before you got there?
No, I didn't know that. I didn't know that part. And so I go, and he does. He has the whole thing lined up for me. As a matter of fact, part of the story, which I won't tell here because it's so long, is how deeply involved he had got me. I ended up on, I think, 7 airplanes on my way to Le Mans, and 2 trains, and 4 or 5 taxi cabs. And the only thing he missed was a boat. And I ended up in the wrong place. There's 2 towns called Malicorn. They're near Le Mans, and I ended up in the wrong one.
When you say he arranged it, are you talking about
Dick Barber? So I went, and of course the drama of hanging with Paul and sharing a trailer and all that kind of stuff was pretty dramatic. Who'd have expected that?
Okay, so let's go. Tell me some stories, or tell me about your time with Newman.
Well, Newman.
Apparently, he's just from you and everybody else. He's just a regular guy.
Well, he could be doing this interview, and he wouldn't mind doing it. I mean, that he would say, "No, you're not going to interview me. I'll interview you." That was who he was. He was more interested in finding out what kind of a hamburger Jerry liked versus.
Yeah, you told me he was more apt to wipe a car down if the mechanics asked him than even maybe some of the drivers.
Well, just to tell you how casual and easy he was, all the time I spent in that trailer with him, most of the time he was in a ratty white T-shirt that had no body to it. It was actually more of a dismal gray from having been through the washing machine 87 times, and droopy jockey shorts, tidy whities or whatever you call them.
Yeah.
And it looked like this guy couldn't afford underwear, but and And that's how he spent his time in the trailer. I mean, he wasn't like dressed pristinely in his race suit or, in a pair of jeans or slacks or something. He was walking around that damn trailer in his jockey shorts. And he didn't give a damn. And then he'd say, "You up for some Grominier crepes?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And he'd say, "Here." And she'd hand me $100 of French money, and I'd go get him because he couldn't be seen in public. And we weren't in a hotel. We were in a trailer, but it was associated with a hotel. For example, he'd go to the refrigerator and get 2 beers and pop them open and come and hand me a beer like he wasn't Paul Newman. I mean, it was, and he didn't talk about, he never ever wanted to talk about anything that had anything to do with his life except what it was like to be behind the wheel of a car.
So maybe you don't even know this, how did he even get on the team? I know that Dick Barber.
It's easy. Budweiser.
And it was because Dick Barber ran the race team ran a ride. And so they're just like, oh, we'll just.
Well, okay, there were 4 cars, and the Barber team managed 3 of them. And in those 3 cars, there were 9 drivers. I'm assuming that 3 of the 9 bought their rides, Newman being one. By buying it, I mean that Newman brought Budweiser, and Budweiser's name was all over the car. So what did he bring? 50 grand, 100 grand, $1 million? I don't know. I don't know what it cost. But Budweiser paid for Newman to drive that car. Now, did Barber initiate it? I don't know, because let's face it, having Paul Newman drive your car is a big honor. And it's going to get you a lot of attention, and it's going to get you other money. So those 2 guys coming together was like Newman tripping and falling into the best racing team on earth that just unfortunately lost, and Barber tripping and falling into Newman's lap. It was just 2 guys tripping and falling into each other's laps, and it was a perfect marriage. The 4th car was 3 rental guys. They all paid for their rides. And they managed their own deal. That Garretson didn't manage that car. And so then the following year, he said, I'll pay your airfare, but you got to share a room with whomever you're assigned to that night. So one night it would be somebody that I didn't even know. Another night it was Garretson. Sharing a room with Garretson and Rahal isn't too shabby because you get to be with 2 famous people. Garretson was the champion of the entire world in endurance racing that year, and Rahal became Bobby Rahal, one of the greatest race drivers of all time.
So you told me a story about both of them. I don't know if this was like within different years.
No, same year.
And you
no, different year. You're right. The first year it was Garretson.
Right.
79 was Garretson. And I shared a room with him the night before the race. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And so it's the night before the race, and we've been out to dinner, and I think they started the race at noon that year instead of 2 or 4. They started it 2 hours early because of something that was going on in France. And so in spite of the fact that you're going to be in the biggest race on earth the following day, we're at home in bed kind of early. And so, he's over here and I'm in a cot over here. And I said, hey, Bob, what's it feel like to know you're going to be racing down the Mulsanne tomorrow at 270 miles an hour? And last year you tumbled a car 9 times over end.
How fast do the 935s go down Mulsanne? They don't go that fast. Anyway.
Well, whatever. But that's what I said to him.
Yeah.
And he didn't answer. He was asleep. And I couldn't sleep. I didn't sleep all night long. And I wasn't driving. I was just hanging around. So that was my night with Garretson. Rahal, the following year, I shared the night before the race with Rahal. And this is really funny. Rahal's way taller than I am, but we had the same waist size. And I spilled something on my pants at dinner. So we get back to the room, and Rahal says, here, and he throws me a pair of Levi's. And they're about this long, too long. So I put them on, and they fit, except that I had to turn the cuffs up and everything. Well, I took them home with me. I never returned them to Rahal. So I still have a pair of Rahal's Levi's that I consider a great souvenir. Great guy. Totally great guy. Just like Newman, only not as famous. And I mean, really, and he's from Ohio, where I'm from. And he's, a family guy. He's a race car wacko and pretty damn good at it.
Yeah. Jerry said, like, he just was like, him and his wife would just cook breakfast every morning.
Yeah, they were just regular people.
And then you told me that you always wanted to talk to him about cars and racing, and he just wanted to talk about his family. He just ignored the racing part.
Yeah. I forget how many kids he has, but doesn't he have 2 race driver sons? I think he does.
I know he's
like the Unsers. He's like the reincarnation of the Unsers. And he talked about that. I said, doesn't that scare you? And he says, well, I do it. I'm not scared. If they're smart and they drive properly and I'll teach them properly, then they'll be okay.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, comment, like, and share with your friends. Feel free to send questions or suggestions to the email in the description of the show. Special thanks to our sponsor, Circuit 64. Goodbye for now. We hope we can get together again for our next episode. Now get out there and enjoy the cars and the people.